Hi everyone, it's me, Arden Lee. I wanted to make a video tonight about something very specific. And I want to make sure that I'm really careful and nuanced in the way that I unpack this topic because on some level I am aware that with this video I'm speaking to a subsection of people that doesn't really want to be reached. So I'm really setting myself up here. I want to speak to this without minimizing it, in the hopes that that maybe I can plant a seed. That there are some people out there who are maybe enough on the fence that this this perspective might perhaps sway them toward a better and happier place. So I'm going to go ahead and make it. But I want to speak to something that I've noticed lately, which is that as I call in more happiness for myself, as I achieve more success, and as I then in turn figure out how to break down and prescribe the methods that I used to achieve that happiness and success, right? That's sort of what I've been doing for the last 3-4 years or so. I try to figure out how to be happier, live a life that's more fulfilling, and I figure out, I try a bunch of things, I do a bunch of research, and I try and figure out what works, and then I try and teach people not only what works for me, but also how to find what works for them, right? It's a pretty layered process. I'm not just teaching the model of what I did, I'm also teaching the model of how to of how I figured out what to do for myself, right? So that's pretty much, right? That's pretty much what I've been doing for the last several years or so. And so the farther along that path I get, and the more people who come to my work at a later stage in the game, especially who perhaps didn't see the earlier versions of myself that that some of my audience who has been with me for a longer time did see. There's been this sort of there's been this sort of energy lately of comments either either on my work or just sort of in the sort of etheric sphere around some of my success or achievements, or just things that I'm kind of picking up on in the collective as a response to this kind of happiness or success happening out there. And it's this response of defeatism and nihilism. And for example, on some of my videos on YouTube lately, I've noticed a couple comments, and I don't remember if they were from the same person or from different people, but, I'll post something like, I posted a video about being chosen in romantic relationships, or, how being able to love hard is a superpower, and believing in being able to achieve that epic love relationship that you want, and and things like that. And there will be people who will comment on those, and they'll be like, well, yeah, or maybe I'm just doomed forever, and maybe nothing's ever going to get better, and maybe, there are no such things as soulmates, and everyone's just, and I'm just going to end up being lonely for the rest of my life. And this is not only, like, this has been happening around that sector a bit, I think, particularly because I've been more focused on the romantic relationships aspect of my life, in this the latter part of this year in particular, because I've been exploring in that arena more than I normally have throughout the rest of this process. But I've also seen this come in a response to things like healing trauma, right? Where it's like, well, maybe it's never going to be better. Maybe I'm always going to be feeling, the after effects of my PTSD. Maybe I'm always going to be depressed. Maybe, like, what if it never gets better? Like, how come no one ever says anything about that? And I've addressed this before. I understand in many ways where that response can come from, which is this idea that, I made a video that if you search it on my YouTube, you'll find it. I think it's called something like If your pain is so intense that you don't even want help, then it probably needs to be witnessed first. Something like that. If you type in like ardently pain witnessed first in the search bar in YouTube, you'll find it. So if you're one of those people who feels that way, I definitely recommend watching that if you're open to it, because I think you might find that really helpful to kind of understand what's going on and what you might need and why that frustration is coming up. It's hard because then even if, as I say that, like I feel like the pushback is going to be like, I don't want to watch your stupid video, right? You're just marketing to me or whatever, because of course you would feel that way if you're in a lot of pain, right? Especially if you're feeling resentful, or you're feeling, you know, like oh, it must be so easy for you or whatever. And you know, I've gotten that for a long time, even when it was decidedly not easy for me. But you know, I understand where that can come from, right? I understand that response. Because I think in many ways I also felt it myself. How could you possibly comment on my situation or what is possible for me when you don't even understand the depth of my pain, right? So I get that. But what I want to speak to is I'd like to, you know, it's like when people make comments like that, it's not worth it for me to take the time to respond to them, because frankly that's facilitation, and if you're not asking for my help, then I'm not going to give it to you, because I need your permission to exchange that kind of energy, right? But you know, and also that's it's not a good use of my bandwidth or of my time either, to try and convert people who for some reason are coming to my page to argue with me. But I do want to put this out there. I wanted to respond to this kind of a response in a video again, because I certainly wish I had changed my own mind a lot earlier, when I was in that place. When I was in that place of, but you just don't get it, you don't understand, and you know, and again, I needed to be witnessed and I needed to work through it. I wasn't, you know, I'm not encouraging anyone to bypass, right? But there's a big difference between saying like, it'll never get better for me, and I'm just, you know, and everything's awful, and I'm never gonna find love, and I'm never gonna whatever. There's a big difference between that and saying like, I need more time grieving so that I can fully process and release this and not just bypass it, right? Like the energy of those things is so different. One of them knows what it's doing and still has hope for the future, even if they know that they aren't feeling capable of embodying or feeling that hope in the moment. And one is really stuck in the story of their feelings, right? So even if you can make that tiny distinction, that will really, really help. And essentially what I want to say is, you know, I saw this in the incel community a lot. And I once made a video speaking to them. And of course I got hate for it, obviously, you know. Of course they found it, and of course they, you know, just like their rebuttals didn't even make any sense. For those who don't know, the incel community is an online community of people who identify as involuntarily celibate, and they live in this really weird sort of cult of thought where it's like they're finding all of these reasons and they're looking for them and they're amplifying them, like all these reasons why they'll never be desirable because they don't have this special golden ratio chin, or they're this or they're that and whatever, and they get so deep into it that of course it becomes self-fulfilling prophecy. And what I said to them, and what I want to say to all of you who feel that you're doomed, is that you're not that special. You're not that different from anyone else. What I said to these guys was, you know, The only difference between you and a man with healthy relationships is what you're allowing yourselves to think and the way that you're allowing yourselves to view the world. Of course, women aren't going to want to date you if this is how you spend your time and this is what you think about yourself and about them and about the world, you know? Of course, no one wants to date someone like that. It's you know, it's what you're creating, but it's nothing that you're doomed with. And I understand that for people with heavy trauma, I understand how difficult that is. And I also understand, because, you know, I have a lot of heavy trauma myself. And working through, even after coming to a place of peace in my mind, having certain responses in my body is still not pleasant, right? Trauma can feel like a curse sometimes because it roots in your body in a way that even as you're working through it, your body can still respond even when your mind knows better. And it's, believe me, it's a million times better when your mind knows better and you know what to do to self-soothe and to self-regulate. But yeah, it sucks. And I don't want to minimize that experience. That's important for me to say. I don't want to minimize that pain and the fact that PTSD symptoms can last, you know? I don't like to say that that we're not able to ameliorate them over time and that maybe one day they'll even go away eventually, because I refuse to cut ourselves off from that hope. But I also understand that they can persist longer than we would ideally like them to. And it's not fair. And I get that. But we're really not doomed, you guys. We're really not cut off from happiness. We are living in an economy that makes that pursuit more difficult. We are living in late capitalism with an unfair wage gap, you know, and a wealth gap. and and it can be difficult. There can be a lot of struggles, and I don't want to bypass or minimize those either. There's a lot of systemic injustice that we need to address. But you guys, choosing happiness is a thing that we do on the inside. Even in the face of pain, even in the face of trauma, even in the face of systemic injustice. Because we can change the world better from a place where we ourselves have a full cup. So I just don't like to box ourselves into these stories. Despite the injustice in the world, despite the unfairness in the world, the unfairness of pain and trauma and abuse and systemic inequality, I don't want that to be able to take away our hope for what we can create for ourselves. I don't like it when we give away all our power like that. And I think that's actually fundamental to being in the resistance, right? Is giving ourselves a full cup so that we can also serve. So I don't know how you're supposed to achieve happiness or that epic love relationship that you want or the stability that you want if you keep saying, well, it's never going to happen for me. It's great to confront that fear of, hey, what if it does never happen for me? What then, right? That's like confronting our fear of death in some ways. Or confronting our greatest fear. What if we try the thing we want most? What if we try for the thing that we want most and we fail? But we've got to choose the possibility that can for it to happen. Are you so afraid of it not happening that you'd rather just choose for it to not happen than try and potentially fail? Because if that's what's going on, then please at least admit that that's what you're doing. The only way that I pulled myself out of really bad traumatic circumstances and abusive relationships and anger and pain and money trauma and theft and all kinds of betrayal and awfulness that I was experiencing, the only way I did that was by imagining and choosing to commit to the belief that I could have something better. And if you can't imagine better right now, I get that too, because I also remember a time when I could not imagine better. And I had to really stretch myself creatively. I had to really look at what I wanted and picture it and what I saw in other people that I wanted for myself. And I had to believe that there was a way, somehow, that it could be possible. And I'm still on that journey, very much so. But I've come a really long way. And if you're just finding me now, I get where it looks like I'm coming from a lot of privilege. And I do. I have several privileges. But wow, I had a lot of odds against me too, in ways that I wasn't capable of seeing at the time. I had so many trauma imprints that I repressed and just said, no, this is fine, it's okay, I'm just going to survive, right? And it really held me back in ways that I wasn't aware of. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to pass on what I figured out how to do. And I'm trying to remember who I was then when I didn't see it so that I can now reach those people who are like me. And it's hard. Because I get what it's like to feel really closed off and to feel like, well, you don't understand my pain, or you don't know what's happening to me, or everything is bad, right? Because there are programs that are running, that we're repeating, that we're not aware of, and we feel these almost like invisible electric fences when we try to step beyond those same familiar stories into something that we were maybe bullied into feeling we weren't allowed to have or weren't allowed to do, right? That we're not allowed to ask for better for ourselves because that's dangerous. That we're not allowed to assert our needs, right? That we're not allowed to have needs. And I get where that wall feels really real, you know? Oh, well, that person gets to have that and I don't, but that's because they have this and that, you know? Oh, that person, you know, gets to have this or whatever, but I had this, so I can't. It's just, we're never going to get anywhere if we keep running those same stories in our heads. We actually have to work at running the opposite stories. We have to be able to say, hey, I may come from a background with a lot of trauma, a lot of injustice. I may have had a lot of bad shit happen to me in my life, and I don't have the privileges of XYZ people. But you know what? I'm going to find a way from here to there. Ultimately, this decision is about whether we want to live with hope or without hope. I find life a lot more interesting, cool, successful, and happy when I live with hope. And I get why hope is scary and hard, because what if we don't do it? What if it never gets better? That's a legitimate fear. I had that fear along the way too. I just chose to keep going, and I'm still choosing to keep going. So if you can hear this, if you're in the right space for it, I just want to encourage you to choose to live with hope. Because, first of all, it's more effective. It's also more fun. You get to play more, you know? You get to be more creative. It requires thinking, it requires brainstorming, it requires, you know, a level of engagement with our lives that is sometimes a bit vertiginous. But it's much more colorful than living without hope. Because I've been in that place too. And this one is just a lot more fun and rewarding and a lot happier. And if you keep going, it works. So try that and let me know how it goes. Thanks, you guys. I hope this is helpful.